maybe we could just talk a bit about how, and here's the other thing, the line between technology and psychotechnology, because a technology itself, and this is not commonly understood, but it's really just a knowledge structure, right? We figured out how to make a shovel, for instance, and then we've taken the raw materials of nature and fashioned them in a certain way and indexed them to this knowledge structure.
Yep.
So clearly there's a line between the tangible tool and the the tangible technology and the intangible psychotechnology. But they're both information based, I guess, at their core. So how do you kind of draw the bright line around these two different areas?
Well, first of all, I think they blur, and the lines are blurry, and the lines are especially blurry for a cognitive scientist like myself, who believes in the 4E model of cognition. The cognition is inherently embodied and embedded and enacted. And so trying to like one easy way that you might do, and I do it when I have to sort of parse things quickly for people, is, tools fit your body and psychotechnologies fit your mind. But the problem is that implies some sort of strong separation between mind and body. And I ultimately want to challenge that. So when I get to talk, and I'm grateful for this opportunity, when I get to talk about this more carefully, I think of it much more as a continuum. And when we're talking about, well, how much of it is done sort of in working memory, but even literacy is offloaded onto physical objects, or it wouldn't be literacy, right? And so if we're willing to use these terms much more loosely and to realize that they can't ever be grounds for a dualism of any kind, I would say a psychotechnology is more sort of cognitive mental in its emphasis, and a tool, physical technology, is exactly that. It's much more designed to fit your body in terms of its biomechanics than it is designed to fit your body in terms of how it is supporting the information processing that's at the core of your cognition. So, for example, a bicycle is designed to fit your biomechanics and speed you up. Literacy is a physical object, but it's really designed to enhance your capacity to do information processing.
Yes. Okay. That makes sense. And then I guess a further wrinkle to this would then be modern digital technologies.
Well, that's exactly so. For example, what is this that we're using right now? Is it technology? Well, it seems to be technology in that it's designed to fit vision and and it's physical objects like computers and TV screens and cameras and mics and all that. And that's definitely a part of it. But what is it we're actually doing? Well, we're recording so other people can share it. Basically, an intellectual discussion. And so in that sense, it becomes available to other people, and we're trying to do things with this technology to enhance, potentially, I hope, other people's cognition. So we're trying to create something that is shareable with others and not specific others, right? Broadly, it could be broadly disseminated. And it's designed, we hope, to fit their cognition and enhance it in some useful fashion. And so you have problems on the other end of the line. How do you distinguish a psychotechnology from like a theory or a skill? You also have to ask those questions.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So what? This is another thing I've been thinking about is studying the emergence of the printing press. Actually, the Gutenberg printing press. This was a really interesting event because what you had was a technology, right? This physically manifested printing press,
right?
But its real impact on the world was that it accelerated the proliferation of psychotechnologies, right? With literacy and numeracy all of a sudden became much more attainable.
Yes.
And that led to this, global hive mind software update, if you will, where people just became more intelligent on average. And maybe intelligence is the wrong word, but more literate.
They become more literate. They become more, this is called the Flynn effect, that general measures of general IQ are going up across time, and yet it's like that can't be right in some fashion, because if you wind the clock the other way, then people are idiots. Like literal, I mean, in the psychometric sense, like 4 generations back, and that's clearly not the case. Right? And we go all the way back to Plato, like everybody would be like incompetent, and Plato's a genius, and so so there is some discussion about that, and some people think it might be of psychotechnologies, and because we haven't really worked out clearly, and we're talking about this fact, we haven't really worked out clearly the dividing line between intelligence and then how your problem-solving abilities are boosted by psychotechnologies, and why that's not really a property of your intelligence per se. So that hasn't really been very carefully worked out, and I think I think there's other factors driving the Flynn effect. But one good case, about why for the Flynn effect, I think made by Flynn himself, if I remember correctly, was that, of course, literacy changes the taxonomies that we use. Let me give you an example. So if I say to you, what do rabbits and dogs have in common? What are you likely to say?
4 legs.
Right, 4 legs. You'll do morphology. You might say they're mammals, right?
Yeah.
And now, if you ask people today, they're liable to say that because they were given, through literacy, they were given a sort of standardized morphological taxonomy in their education. And so they are much more likely to answer, right? That's the relationship between them. But if you gave that same question to people, say in the 1920s, they're liable to say, well, you use dogs to hunt rabbits.
Right.
That's the relationship. And they get it wrong, because the scientists are scientifically literate, and they think the right taxonomy is the morphological or the evolutionary taxonomy, the cladistic, right? And so literacy I think things like literacy are at least partially responsible for the Flynn effect in a way, for in some sense, making us better at these tests, because it just means that there's more similarity between the mentality of the test makers and the test takers, because literacy averages out the mentality.
Interesting. Okay, so there's the standardization of the protocol in a way makes you more efficient, I guess, but also makes you more similar.
Yes, exactly. And that means that you're going to do better on average, which is what we've seen. Now, I think it's also undeniable. I mean, that's specific to the Flynn effect. I think it's undeniable that literacy gives us tremendous enhanced capacities. And then again, you have to ask yourself, how are we supposed to understand that? And the way I try to understand it is, and this is how it breaks from sort of standard measures of intelligence, I try to understand psychotechnology in the way in which it gives me access to distributed cognition, either other people's minds, or it gives me access to my own mind, right, across time in a way. So I can either network temporal versions of myself or synchronic versions with others, or often both.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So that we could, in an economic analogy, you could say this is actually increasing the scope of trade in a way that you can trade with more slices of yourself across time and others across space, and both. Right. And this is what reading is. When you're reading a classic text, you're exchanging with someone, an author from 100 years ago or whatever it may be.
Exactly. And it's interesting because the connection might go the other way. Because one of the theories, Matt Rossano, and I think it's a plausible theory about why you see that great leap in average intelligence amongst human beings around the Upper Paleolithic transition, is because of the development of trade networks. So there's some event, they think it might have been a super volcano. The human species hits bottleneck. It almost gets too small. They think we might have been down to 10,000 individuals.
Wow.
And then you see, or after that, you see the beginnings of all the things that are very rapidly going to lead to the Upper Paleolithic transition. where you're getting the invention of music and representational art and all this other stuff.
Mm.
And the idea is we seem to have evidence for how humans responded to this crisis, whereas before they had basically gone through a biological change. What you see is a social engineering change. They start to develop widespread, larger trade networks. And obviously they're not just trading goods, they're trading information.
Yes.
And by creating that much more distributed cognition, distributed over different environmental contexts, that seems to have been the most powerful way in which human beings were able to start to adapt to these challenges. And then what happens is you get the invention of all kinds of ritual behavior to try and deal with this new way in which humans are psychosocially organized.
Yes. Wow. Interesting. Yeah. So that, and maybe these terms we're both using, there's a connection here. The Austrians call this the free market, what you're describing as distributed cognition. And it's really, when you're trading goods and services with others, you are, to your point, you're trading information. It's the same. It's
a signaling.
Yes.
So again, you're much more well-versed in economics than I am, but I think, Nozick's point that we have to take, I guess you would call it the symbolic dimension of all exchange into account, and what he calls symbolic utility, which is basically what we're talking. So obviously there is, I don't know, maybe this is the right adjective. There's a financial exchange when you and I are doing some sort of commercial interaction. Mm-hmm. But there's also all kinds of ritual behavior that's going on. And there's social status being conveyed. There's all kinds of other information about group membership. Right. There's also just general information about the culture at large. Well, you've indicated this also in some of the conversations. So I would say one of the things would be to bring in perhaps like to expand on that identification you just met and say, well, in addition to whatever is happening sort of economically in the traditional sense, what's happening in terms of distributed cognition? How is it reorganizing itself? So let's go back to the printing press. Mm-hmm. The printing press drives the Protestant Reformation, which is a religious and cultural revolution that affects the world.
Right.
Now, people are doing all of the exchanges, for their local political, financial reasons, but they're also, creating, as you said, they're linking minds in a way that allows for, really makes the Protestant Reformation possible. Yes. And nobody would, I'm sure if you asked anybody as they were doing, are you trying to change, right? That's not, they were trying to change the religion at some point, but I don't think they thought that what they were doing was trying to change sort of cultural organization in a fundamental way.
Yeah.
Perhaps they were implicitly. Go ahead.
This is it's spontaneous, it's emergent, it's self-organizing.
It's self-organizing. And this is the thing about both technologies and psychotechnologies. They suffer, as all things do, from the frame problem. They suffer from the fact that, and biological evolution capitalizes on this. It's how you solve. It's basically how you solve the robustness problem in biological evolution. You capitalize on that everything always has side effects. The price you pay is that everything always has side effects, right? And so things are going to ramify in ways you're not really intending. Right. That's one of the things I talk about when I talk about making use of a lot of other people's work, not just my own work by any means, that, literacy and coinage are invented for very prosaic, political, economic reasons, but they engender that you can make a good case that they really help drive the actual revolution, which launches, a lot of the, world religions and world philosophies. And I don't think that was the intent of anybody when they invented these things.